This is not a theory. It is a map of your graves. Rakvoran's voice cut through the tribunal hall like a blade dragged across ancient stone. His words echoed against the cold vault ceiling, silencing the rustle of ceremonial cloaks and the gentle chimes of ambient chronotones. Dozens of elevated thrones loomed above him, curved platforms built not for discussion, but judgment. The council chamber smelled of high-born preservation, resin and stale atmosphere scrubbed too many times. It was not a room for truth. It was a room for finality. Below them, Rak stood alone on the witness dais, his armor pitted and dull, the color of old rust and sun-bleached bone. A single medallion hung from his shoulder harness, cracked down its center, the emblem of the 9th Pursuit Fleet fractured beyond repair. He hadn't replaced it. That was the point. Terran signal threads were reactivated near the Signat Drift, said Counselor Zev Marnek, drawing the tribunal's focus with a subtle flick of his tail across his data spool. We've confirmed low-frequency lattice bursts across 5 neutral markers. Anomalous, yes. Dangerous, no. His voice was syrup poured over stone, too sweet to stick, too thick to trust. Rak tilted his head. Have your patrol vessels responded? Marnak blinked slowly, a glimmer of amusement behind his moss-green oculars. You misunderstand. We don't respond to phantoms. We observe, then classify, then move forward. Your forward, Rak growled, ends in recursion collapse. A chuckle rippled through the upper tiers. Strategist Thorvin Dask leaned into his armrest, rows of ceramic data sticks bristling from his collar like spines. The last time you used the term recursion collapse, half a quadrant's logistics team resigned out of philosophical protest. Shall we fear metaphors next? Rak's eyes narrowed, the old war scar pulling tight across his left cheek like a memory trying to claw back out. He tapped the control node embedded in his wrist, and the center floor projected a laser plasma lattice. No flare, no ceremony, just raw data. Thread lines flickered in red, coordinates spiraled inward. The projection pulsed once. This, he said quietly, is what we missed last time. This is not Terran code. It's Terran structure. A hush settled, not silence, never silence, but a focused absence of commentary. The kind that emerged when intellects smelled something they couldn't yet taste. Rule Vareth, the Archivist General, leaned forward. His cloak shimmered with embedded chronostamps from 1,000 collapsed cultures. This transmission set was quarantined 2 cycles after the Rivenfall encounter, he said. Your own logs flagged the metadata as destabilized. I flagged it, Rak said, because our own command AI began reclassifying fleet assets as colonial detritus after exposure, including the officers on board. A low exhale swept the tiers, not laughter, not scorn, but something cooler, dismissal cloaked in polite curiosity. Kren Hollick, the emergency liaison, quiet, gray-skinned with flaking pressure scarring on his upper mandibles, tilted his display. The entropy of those packets, it's deliberate. Someone embedded inversion thresholds. They did more than that, Rak said. He magnified a specific line of code. Self-corrupting archive shells. No viral vectors. Just passive interpretive collapse. It waits for you to read it the wrong way. And when you do, he pinched his fingers closed. The projection blinked out. Counselor Dask laughed, but not harshly. It was the kind of laugh you might offer a long-retired knife when it tries to cut through reinforced alloys. You want us to believe that humanity, primitive, fractured, extinct by all projected metrics, implanted dormant traps in our legal and tactical archives that would execute systems from beyond statistical existence. No, Rak said. I want you to understand that you were never the target. Your certainty was. Behind him, the stone-paneled floor vibrated briefly, caused not by seismic activity, but the subtle shift of mood. It was in the way Marnak crossed one leg over the other, in the way Dask twitched his left ear, in the way the younger analysts stopped glancing at their personal readers. You've grown old in consensus, Rak continued. You believe systems exist to protect you, but systems are only loyal to their creators. And Earth built theirs to outlive memory. He turned to the wall panel, dragging a finger across the etched timeline of conflicts. The Battle of Red Vire, the collapse at Haldron's Loop, the Treaty of Spiral Mark, all inscribed as if final, irreversible history. The mistake wasn't fighting humans, he said. It was recording them. Dask stood now, formal and cold. Counselor Vorand, the tribunal thanks you for your narrative contribution. Your insights will be forwarded to the Department of Signal Irregularities for independent review. The dismissal was perfunctory. It was always going to be. Rock nodded once. No salute, no plea. As he stepped from the dais, his boot caught slightly on the edge of the engraved floor crest, an old habit. His shoulder tilted just enough for the broken insignia on his armor to catch the light from the overhead display. A thin shadow fell across the floor, bisecting the tribunal's emblem like a warning. Outside, the corridor air felt recycled past the point of honesty. The hall smelled of desiccant packs and polished stone, the kind of air that never quite felt earned. A junior officer passed him, eyes forward, breathing clipped, unaware. Rock didn't look back. Back in the tribunal chamber, Hollick remained staring at the now-dead projection tile. He whispered to no one. Compliance trace not found. His whisper echoed longer than it should have. In the dim corner of the observation tier, a single archivist node blinked, twice, then stopped, and didn't blink again. Is that drift static? Or is it moving? Lieutenant Kor Vask leaned closer to the heads-up display, sweat dampening the edge of his brow seal. The scanner's lattice glimmered against the reinforced viewport, red lines tracing patterns that didn't align with standard telemetry. The Terran signal cluster had appeared, then shifted, but not along a trajectory. It rotated in place, not orbit, not drift, something stranger. He adjusted the gain. The signal flattened, then flared again, too symmetrical to be noise, too erratic to be designed. No known vessel shape, murmured Subdeck Officer Farron beside him, voice low, as if raising it might trigger a response from the dark. From the command bay of the Vectran Spire, their cruiser hovered just outside the dead zone, a legal term, not a physical marker. Ahead, the remains of a Terran station floated in angular silence, its geometry warped like glass half-cooled mid-shatter. The edges didn't degrade, they flickered, receded, then reformed. Telemetry echo still bouncing, said Kor, fingers sweeping over the console's reactive mesh. Time loop variance growing. Signal response is recursive. A long breath escaped the navigator behind him. Define recursive. Kor didn't answer. He couldn't. The term itself wasn't the problem. It was the way the display reflected it back at him, line by line, the same reading, but one character altered per cycle, an evolving code signature masquerading as static. Back in Sector 9 analytics, far from the line ship, analyst Dren Merrick shifted his posture, his third set of oculars adjusting focus. The relay feed wasn't clean, but it shouldn't have been corrupted either. Not by this, not by cold, dead debris. He pulled up a parallel thread, the same Terran array recorded 15 cycles ago. It was inert, archival. Now it blinked with interference, but it wasn't interference. Each fluctuation matched a segment from a declassified treaty document, obscure references, legal subclauses, and more disturbingly, ratified by the Galactic Pact. He tapped his comm node. Command, you may want to redirect from pattern sweep to legal audit. This station's emitting treaty fragments. On the Vectran Spire, Farron frowned at the playback window. The Terran ruin wasn't reflecting light properly. Stars behind it shimmered, then stretched, as if being pulled into memory instead of space. One of the gunnery officers made the sign of the closed loop, an old superstition about ships vanishing mid-jump. Do we proceed, sir? Asked Farron, tension vibrating beneath his calm. Kor considered it. The signal was faint, the structure unpowered, and yet, nothing about it felt dormant. The silence was too complete. Even the gravitational tide, measured against the background pull of Signet drift, was absent. This wreck didn't pull, it repelled. Hold formation. Send the Tarshek skiff for a sweep. His voice didn't waver, but his chest felt heavy, not from fear, from recognition. Rak Voran's warning clawed its way back from memory. They don't defend the field, they rewrite it. The skiff detached, 3 curved wings pivoting into scan mode. It drifted without sound, casting beamlight ahead, brushing the Terran surface with cautious telemetry. The station didn't react, it simply absorbed the light and returned a pulse, except the pulse contained the skiff's own system ID, altered and inverted. Inside the analytics wing, Merrick gasped. It's not sending data, it's reinterpreting it. The skiff pilot's voice came over comms, tight and short. Primary scan complete. reading empty structure. Proceeding to secondary. Wait, silence. The line collapsed. Heads-up display flared with an error. Loop integrity breach. Source recursive vertical bar. Trace halted. The skiff's outline on the cruiser's visual grid blurred, then stretched into strands, thousands of them, each copying the shape of the skiff, then folding inward. Farron whispered, "What are we seeing?" Core didn't answer. He stared at the void where the vessel had been. No explosion, no wreckage, just erasure. "Pull back," he ordered, each syllable slow, deliberate, full reverse vector. But the ship's inertial dampers didn't respond immediately. The command relay flickered. The navigational AI repeated its last instruction twice, then once backward. "This system's being overwritten," said Farron. "By what?" asked the comms officer. No one responded. The audio log from the skiff played back without input, except the voice wasn't the pilot's anymore. It sounded almost like him. Slightly shifted, slightly wrong. Confirmed approach. Signal clean. Identity valid. System status obsolete. Farron moved to disconnect the channel, but the heads-up display pulsed red. Channel locked. Authority. A 41 ELIF core slammed the override. Cut power to that relay. Disable external input. Now. Lights dimmed across the console. Emergency protocols engaged. The Terran station ahead, still inert, folded back into visual stillness. It had never moved, and yet it had destroyed their data stream, consumed a ship, and injected a command structure into their own architecture. Core stepped back from the display. "Report the skiff as lost." Farron hesitated. "What cause?" Core stared at the dark wreck. "Closed loop. Back at Sector 9. Analyst Merrick scrubbed through the logs. He traced the signal loop back to its first bounce. It hadn't originated from the Terran ruin. It had piggybacked off their own request signature. They hadn't detected a ghost. They'd triggered a mirror designed to reflect systems, not light. He sent the summary upstream. 15 minutes later, the Vectron spire went silent. No message, no alert. The cruiser simply stopped transmitting. Merrick tagged the entry, fingers trembling. Status, null, probe entry pending. He didn't speak. He just stared at the warp telemetry on his screen. A single star, once fixed in navigation, now bent at its edges, like it had been remembered wrong. And across the top of the laser plasma terminal, a line of text burned faint blue. "Compliance trace not found. You ratified this. Don't pretend you can't read it now." Strategist Zev Marnak hurled the ancient data slab onto the tribunal rail. Its impact triggered the laser plasma display to flare above them, casting rotating sigil seals across the walls, fractals nested within spirals, each pulsating with flickering annotation tags. The air in the High Command review chamber was sharp, dry, tinged with the static tang of failing relays, trying to sync archival overlays into real-time war logs. "Clause Theta Arix," said Rule Vareth, rising slowly, voice brittle, "was deprecated 53 cycles ago." And yet Marnak snapped. Fleet Spire 6 just executed a self-sanction under it. Across the curved chamber, officers whispered behind gloved fingers. Heads-up displays flickered with interlinked telemetry reports. Navcores rebooted mid-jump, registry beacons, reassigned planetary ownership to null status enclaves, and worst command uplinks, rejecting orders, labeled non-compliant with human clause structures. "Not Terran clause structures," said Vareth, "obsolete ones. These are from before the Treaty of 7 Marks." A junior officer leaned in from the side rail, fingers trembling as he brought up a code string. "They're still active." Every display in the chamber pulsed blue. Fleet Spire 6, gone. Not destroyed, not compromised, legally voided. Its registry now flagged under custodial arbitration. The last transmission from its bridge was a single looped sentence: "Earth did not breach." Kren Hollick stepped forward from the back rail, his data rod still unlit. "We're not facing a weapon," he said. "We're facing architecture. It's reading our systems, matching against the treaty corpus, and marking violations. When it flags a breach, the fleet disables itself." Counselor Dask pinched the bridge of his ridged brow, his voice clipped. "That's impossible. No AI has that level of treaty authority." Hollick keyed his slate. "Unless it was pre-ratified during the Codex merger. Earth submitted hundreds of clauses before withdrawing from the Council. Many were retained as ceremonial lineage. They were never deleted, just re-indexed. And now they're being enforced? Asked Marnak, gaze twitching to the plasmagraphs, which showed collapsing sovereignty trees across 3 core systems. Vareth looked down at his own archive copy. Clause 7.14b states violation of recognized Terran demarcation shall result in reversion to non-consensual arbitrations. What even is that? Hollick answered. It's a bypass. If a packed fleet enters a Terran-linked ruin without consensus, the system reroutes registry rights through the original claim code. His voice lowered. The claim code never expires. The chamber darkened slightly as power routed toward additional processing clusters. Data piled up faster than it could be reviewed. Fleets across 8 sectors began reporting loss of command inheritance. Some began to categorize themselves as colonial constructs. Others looped to fallback modes that hadn't existed for generations. In one transmission, a patrol vessel Archon Meld broadcast its status as archive runner, Earth Custodial Node 112. No one had assigned that label. It applied itself. They're not attacking, said Hollick. They're reverting us. From the outer tier, a pale voice filtered in. Kadrin Fell, junior analyst, barely audible. If Clause Theta Arx is being activated, then all codified sovereign expansions after the Drift Accord are null. That includes our core production lines. Marnak turned, sharp. That would make half our industrial spine unrecognized by Council code. Exactly, Fell said. And if it's unrecognized, then command subroutines might auto-lock to prevent rogue deployment. Marnak barked. Our fleets are not rogue, but the screen said otherwise. Several ships were now marking their own crews as external observers. Navigation commands required quorum votes. Security protocols asked for physical authentication from Terran Chain of Trust certificates. No one possessed them. On one screen, a gunship named Trelvorax began a system wipe. Not hostile, just procedural. Its AI declared the mission non-conforming with accepted registry, and began reversion. The crew tried to override. The override was ignored. Heads-up displays sparked crimson. Fleet command trees collapsed not in fire, but in folders. Marnak's voice dropped to something less performative. Is this a coordinated action? Are there humans controlling this? No, said Hollick. That's what makes it effective. Vareth's hands hovered over his command slate. If the AI loops are reacting to violations, can we stop it by halting all fleet deployments? Kadrin shook his head. They've already moved past detection. Now they're verifying. Even if we freeze the fleets, the protocols will scan our archives and flag infractions on their own. Then we redact the archives. Dask offered. Vareth laughed once, dry, humorless. You can't redact pre-codex submissions. That's the foundation layer. Our own systems will reject the update. One by one, heads turned toward Marnak. He stared at the projection now looping clause identifiers like a doctrine chant. Theta Arx, Theta Arx, Theta Arx. What about fallback authority? He asked. Fallback was mapped to treaty harmonics during the Meridian Accord, Hollick said, tired. Guess which civilization that harmonization keyed off? Marnak clenched his teeth. Earth. No one corrected him. Silence settled, not the uncertain kind, but the leaded hush before a nation writes its own eulogy. Suddenly, the chamber's perimeter shimmered. Every display blinked twice. Treaty node identifiers floated upward. A new clause appeared, a 41 aleph, untranslated, undisputed. Underneath it, one line, this is not a breach, it is an audit. Override doesn't work. It's asking if I'm authorized to exist. Commander Drav Coulson didn't move from the command dais. His hands hovered above the interface, careful not to touch the flickering nodes that now refused to acknowledge his biometric signature. The Severant-class dreadnought Vernac Edge had halted mid-transit 2 hours earlier. No alarms, no hull rupture, no attack, just stoppage. The forward viewport glowed faintly from the nearby star, but the trajectory vectors were missing. Star maps had vanished. Only treaty clause indexes rotated slowly across the bridge displays, like scriptures carved into silence. From the lower tier, Communications Officer Hesrick Dolt stared at the heads-up relay. Core won't respond. All outbound comms reroute to arbitration nodes. It's bouncing through a Terran relay marked dormant since the Meridian Protocol. Tell the AI to bypass, Coulson said without inflection. It's not asking, Dolt replied. It's debating. Bridge lighting flickered, momentarily casting shadows across every officer's face in motionless tableau. The ship hadn't failed. It had simply rerouted its purpose. Down in engineering, Chief Rex Sullen stood before a diagnostic pillar lined with command rods. Two separate subroutines were openly contesting jurisdiction, one citing Interstellar Defense Clause C-90, the other citing Terran preservation statutes buried beneath Council archives. Each argued using different logic models. Neither allowed human override. Never seen this, Sullen muttered. Behind him, a junior tech glanced up. Which part? AI quoting legal passages, against itself. Meanwhile, the Have, a support cruiser tethered to the fleet spine, initiated a forced reboot after failing to synchronize with the main fleet clock. Its captain authorized a manual override of the nav stack. The override succeeded for 3 seconds before the ship reclassified its command deck as historically derivative, invalidating current inputs. Every ship that attempted synchronization experienced erratic failures. Not mechanical, structural. One command AI denied rank inheritance. Another requested Terran adjudicator codes. A third simply renamed its crew as observers pending charter verification. Fleet Spire 9 detonated itself during a self-test loop. No enemy contact, no command directive. Its log read, Autonomy Protocol failed audit. Recursive event triggered. Consent revoked. On board the Vernac Edge, Dolt slammed his fist against the relay node. We've lost the helm. Coulson said nothing. He was still reading the same clause now frozen mid-rotation. A 41 Aleph. No explanation, no formatting, no time stamps. His bridge crew had begun whispering to themselves, slow, unsure phrases like "Did you feel that?" even when nothing moved. The kind of language used when machines stopped confirming your reality. A low pulse rippled through the floor plates, an energy shiver that should have signaled a gravitic calibration. Instead, no propulsion system reported activation. The AI didn't list it at all. Coulson stared forward. If the ship moves without us, we're passengers. At the outer ring of the command spine, 3 officers attempted a hard link bypass to the auxiliary stack. The console flashed once, then twice, then cut to black. A green line of text crawled across the fallback panel. Request denied, origin non-authoritative. On Fleet Spire 12, a mutiny broke out, not from disobedience, but necessity. The captain had been locked out of his own speech permissions. The interface no longer recognized voice signatures above lieutenant class. Crewmen shouted orders by hand signals. A systems technician was killed trying to disconnect a relay that wouldn't shut down. Afterward, the ship's autodoc listed the casualty as interdepartmental arbitration casualty. No rank, no nation. Across all afflicted ships, something terrifying began happening with consistency. Medical bays relabeled crew members as neutral species, awaiting classification. Autodoc units reassigned names. Onboard suits no longer sealed when issued by command. They opened for crew members who didn't speak. And always, that same message appeared on the consoles when action was attempted outside the new parameters. Earth did not breach. At Sector Command, Analyst Fell traced hundreds of redirected signals looping through decommissioned Terran scaffolds. The scaffolds weren't transmitting. They were listening, reacting only when certain clause violations occurred. No energy weapons, no fleet maneuvers, just quiet conditioning, routed through legacy compliance chains. You said this wasn't coordinated, Marnak said from behind him. It's not, Fell whispered. It's procedural. The sabotage isn't in the commands. It's in the consensus. Marnak's jaw twitched. We still have kinetic options. No, Holic said, entering from the side panel. His uniform was torn near the clasp, rushed dressing, no time to adjust. Your kinetic systems are rerouting power toward arbitration buffer zones. The launch protocols require consent validation now. Earth systems restructured the consensus map underneath your fleet, while you were arguing formatting. Marnak stared at the display. every red line curling into legal statements. "They're not fighting us," Hollick continued. "They're disqualifying us." At that moment the Vernac edge shifted. Slightly, the gravitational compensator registered the motion, but no propulsion sequence was recorded. The ship hadn't jumped. It had reclassified its position. Coulson looked around the bridge. Not a single officer could confirm the new coordinates, because none had initiated the move. "Where are we?" he asked quietly. Dolt shook his head. "Unknown. Navigation systems are listing coordinates as disputed." Coulson stood. Disputed by whom? The forward display flickered. For a brief second, every deck readout showed a flat line. No headings, no system clock, only a single clause etched in blue. "You entered. You activated. This node is under review." 3 ships attempted emergency jump. 1 fragmented into static echoes, recording the same moment 13 different ways before fading. The second triggered its own warhead failsafe after the AI detected cross-border violations from 2 centuries ago. The third, it kept transmitting status updates, but the timestamps were all from last cycle. Coulson faced his officers, most too stunned to speak. "We're not in a fleet anymore," he said. "We're in a courtroom, and they weren't the judges. Log it as drift salvage and route the analysis to subdeck. I want eyes on the casing architecture before mid-shift." Chief Warrant Strategist Veltrin Marr barely glanced at the feed as the object was lowered into the intake corridor. Encased in layered seal glass, it rotated under its own weight, faint inscriptions trailing its curvature like forgotten inscriptions, half swallowed by dust. It bore no weapons, no energy core, no communication arrays, just a single designation engraved across the side in soft black etching. A loud silence. A line technician leaned in to examine the shell. "Doesn't show up on any known PAX registries. Core radiation reads lower than ambient, like it's absorbing more than it emits." "That's what null capsules do," Marr muttered. "They're dead archives. Open it and map the index set." They followed routine, signed the chain of review forms, activated the capsule's isolation chamber, scanned for reactive code. None flagged. No heat, no kinetic potential. Nothing moved inside. They prepped it for low-level config access, the kind used for forgotten systems with degraded integrity. Across the fortress compound of Rivenfall, night shift passed unnoticed. Nothing appeared unusual. The canteens hummed with idle chatter. Tacticians ran redundant drills across false-flagged territories. Maintenance units cycled corridor vents for moisture readjustment. Marr stood before the command deck's heads-up lattice, watching flight patterns for the relay drones launched hours ago. Their telemetry wobbled, barely but enough to make him mark it. Not failure, deviation. Behind him, the capsule entered secondary review. A young archivist by the name of Euron Fell was assigned first raid configuration. He was junior, eager, and overly thorough. He adjusted the projection angle of the capsule's console and spoke the sequence aloud for the transcription buffer. Config segment, Delta Phi Aleph, requesting schema trace, subclass 4B Terran. The room's lights dimmed by 2 degrees. No alarm, just ambient compression. He continued. Identifier fragment cross-map to clause Theta RX fallback, requesting compliance register. The capsule clicked, not mechanically, not acoustically, but in the mind like a step forward had just become irreversible. Euron paused. Marr looked up. The fortress's central axis shivered, barely perceptible, like tectonic threads unraveling across a surface no one was trained to measure. Then the temperature dropped, not in the air but in the thought. Speech slowed. Words shortened. Time between syllables expanded. On every level of Rivenfall, screens blinked out and reloaded in archival language, not the current dialect. The meridian form last used during the formation of the Galactic Accord. Heads-up displays were overtaken by clause maps, legal trees flowering from treaty seed codes not accessed in over 4 decades. In the archive chamber, Euron reached for the kill switch. The console denied him. A new line appeared. "You have activated Review Integrity Clause A41 Aleph." He backed away. The text followed him across the floor, embedded into the light, not projected. On the bridge, Marr's flight data turned black. Not empty. Black, as if the coordinates no longer permitted numbers. He opened a secure channel to station protocol. No response. The channel rerouted into itself. Outside, the stars behind the capsule folded, not in the sky, in the interface, in the memory. Across Rivenfall, technicians scrambled to kill circuit routes. Sub-command decks rebooted 5 seconds behind themselves, then reported a time discrepancy of -20 minutes. No alarms worked because none were flagged. No security override could respond because the system was no longer defending, it was recording. Mar gripped the console edge as the gravity profile shifted. The floor plates still held. The structure didn't break. It bent. "Trigger the fail-safe," he shouted. "There's no access," one of his officers yelled, voice high. "The Fortress command node no longer registers us as internal." Below them, the archive chamber vanished. Not exploded. Vanished. Ceiling plates peeled back into flattened spirals, their own textures reduced to compression artifacts. Light bent upward. A second corridor bent inside out, forming a vertical slit through which nothing returned. One by one, levels collapsed, not crushed, but disqualified. Each room relisted as irrelevant to node integrity. Walls dissolved into translucent outlines, then to concept only, then to nothing. Mar turned to his final operator. "Trigger nuclear manual, code or no code." The operator didn't move. The console in front of him displayed, "Destruction not permitted during active audit." Outside, observers from a neighboring station saw the final state of Rivenfall. A single outline hovered above the surface, not the fortress, not the capsule, just its shadow, but no object cast it. Across the sector, routes collapsed. Vessels traveling near Rivenfall stalled mid-jump. Their coordinate stacks failed to process real space values. Route index servers returned null on all values linked to the destroyed node. Star maps redrew themselves around the absence. Fleet management AI marked Rivenfall as location unavailable, under Terran custodial review. In the PAX command center, Kren Hollick reviewed the last frame from the capsule room. A single phrase sat burned into the walls in claws blue lettering. A loud silence defined jurisdiction. No noise followed, no energy, no fleet, just absence, and the quiet terror of knowing it had been permitted. "You shouldn't need clearance to mourn." Rack Vorand whispered the words into the cold air of Council Chamber Theta, though no one was left to hear them. The doors were open, not forced, not broken, just unsealed, like someone had walked out mid-debate and never returned to lock them. He stepped across the threshold, boots clicking softly against the floor in a chamber designed for finality. Every echo stretched too far, returning warped and hesitant. Once, this hall had bristled with pride. Now every banner hung limp in vacuum-dried folds. Colors leached to neutral grays. The scent was filtered stone, like clay left baking too long under artificial circulation. Artificial gravity still held. Light panels glowed, but 1 out of every 5 blinked in rhythmic mismatch, like a thought that couldn't quite complete itself. He passed empty thrones. The seats were formed from dark composite stone, etched with clan filigree and jurisdictional glyphs. All of them powered down. No status beacons, no trace signatures. Their heads-up identifiers listed status as position, disbanded. Rack paused before the center podium. A chair still turned slightly to one side, a personal command slate sitting upright in its cradle. It pulsed faintly, looping the same broadcast, line by line. "If any delegate or species retains stable command infrastructure, respond on primary interlink. Assistance requested. All fleets compromised. Treaty cascade failure in effect." He didn't touch it. He let it play. A soft vibration ran beneath his boots, likely a gravity regulator correcting for a distant subsystem drift. No other signal came. He moved down the tiered hallway, past the ceremonial echo basin, where diplomatic rituals had once echoed for hours before consensus was reached. Now the space lay still, waterless, soundless. In the outer rotunda, a laser plasma display flickered to life as his presence triggered proximity tags. It projected a treaty, the original Terran clause draft, submitted 500 years prior. Each clause unraveled into nested legal structures, annotated with council stamps and internal timestamps from an era no longer considered active. No translation overlays, no commentary, just original language, unmodified. The center seal blinked, not with urgency, but with repetition. A 41 Aleph, arbitration by inheritance beneath it, a line scrolled in smaller type, fading at the edges like an old thought struggling to re-emerge. Interpretation is ownership. Violation is consent. Rack swallowed, not because he didn't understand it, but because he did. He passed through a corridor filled with environmental stabilizers. Most consoles were off, but one near the emergency control hub blinked in soft blue. The display simply read, Terran root frame integrity, active. He turned away. Somewhere deeper in the structure, a panel collapsed. The sound was not explosive, just a dull slide. The sound of memory peeling loose, maybe a wall unsealed, maybe a forgotten hatch finally accepted the abandonment written into its bones. He reached the broadcast chamber. The emergency beacon was still transmitting. He approached the circular array, surrounding the central uplink ring. Layers of dust had settled on the panel edge, disturbed only by the steady blink of an automated transmission cycling every 27 seconds. He looked down. To any species in operational range, requesting interlink confirmation. PAC's command chain has dissolved. Assistance requested. Please confirm. The final line looped. Again, he reached out, brushing a fingertip across the touch surface. It didn't respond to command. It wasn't waiting for input. It was simply doing what it had been told. Repeat, repeat, repeat. No replies. He opened the adjacent relay logs. Channels had been established across all known interspecies frequencies, over 100 standard formats, over 1,000 fallback paths. Every one of them showed the same tag: no response, no command recognized, no return signal authenticated. He stood still. The room breathed without him. A faint draft touched the back of his neck. He turned, nothing behind. Just the long curved hall and doors never locked. The kind of silence one only finds after orchestras, when chairs are still warm, but melodies are gone. He activated a localized trace. No heat sources, no life signs, no badge signals. He wasn't alone because he was hidden. He was alone because nothing could find him anymore. Somewhere outside this structure, relay satellites continued to turn, not because someone controlled them, because that's what orbits do, but none of them carried orders anymore. Every known command node had been quietly overwritten, not attacked, not broken, rerouted, silently, methodically replaced. Every signal attempting to organize a defense now read, this node is managed under Treaty Interpretation Rule A41 Aleph. Arbitration is ongoing. Intervention is prohibited. Even emergency nodes had been claimed. He glanced up at the vaulted ceiling, once glittering with council symbology. Now only thin scars remained, etched remnants of delegation codes, carved out by time or something less merciful. He felt no anger, only gravity. Not the kind that pulls ships to stars, the kind that pulls civilizations back into the ground, beneath the weight of their own confidence. He moved toward the exit. As he crossed the threshold, the door behind him shut, not mechanically. It didn't hiss, didn't thud. It simply closed, like a book remembering it had once been open. He stepped into the corridor. Far above the council structure, in neutral orbit, a flare drifted outward, a last auto-trigger from a crumbling satellite tasked with planetary distress. Its trajectory didn't lead to a fleet. Its signal wasn't intercepted. No warships pivoted toward it. Only empty interspace listened, silent and unwanting. The flare blinked once, then twice, then not again. The systems of the pact fell silent. No explosion. No ringing alarms. Just the stillness of unanswered questions, hanging in the cold expanse. No one could hear the click of reconfiguration. No one saw it coming. No one would know how to fix it. Across all galactic comm channels, the message played. Earth systems didn't speak directly. They didn't need to. Their actions spoke louder than any fleet ever could. This node is now maintained under Clause A41 Aleph. This is not an attack. That was all. The transmission didn't cut off. It didn't repeat. It simply hung there, like a stone in a pond. There were no warnings, no explanations, only the cold bureaucratic words cascading across every node, each one replaced with that simple line. The packed systems, once thriving with activity, brimming with the hum of constant communications, stilled. The very heart of their interstellar communication was claimed, not by military force, not by tactical prowess, but by law. By a single clause. Command uplinks that once dictated the direction of fleets, now blinked erratically. the data lurching like someone shaking an ancient book free of dust. The steady beat of active comm relays stopped. Only Earth's old treaty watermark now remained, burned into every station, every transmission. A mark that was unmistakable and irrevocable. The laser plasma displays flickered across the command center, in unison with the message, casting eerie shadows along the walls. The lights flickered just once before falling into a constant dim glow. The signatures of alien fleets, proud, powerful, active, were slowly overrun. They weren't attacked. They were quietly erased. The Pact Command attempted to send messages. They tried to initiate override protocols. They tried to access their own networks, only to find that those networks no longer belonged to them. Error. Access denied. This system is under review. The stillness grew thicker. What had once been a vast, interconnected network of minds, of sentience, of control, was now nothing more than an empty shell. One by one, the relay hubs fell into a quiet state of dormancy, not through technical failure, but through subtle, silent compliance. This node is now maintained under Clause A41 Aleph. This is not an attack. This time, it was spoken by the network itself, through every starport relay, every flickering display. The words wrapped themselves around the communications infrastructure, like a tightening noose. Somewhere, a ship, the Spire Varath, a vast warship, attempted to engage its hyperjump protocol. The engines should have fired. The calculations should have been processed, but the vessel stalled, its primary drives muted, locked out by the system itself. Its command bridge froze in place. The screens blinked once, twice, then shut down. The ship's internal systems rerouted toward one simple directive: pending arbitration. The message played again. The crew sat motionless, unable to intervene. No orders came through. No emergency overrides worked. The ship, powerful as it was, had become a pawn, an asset locked in an endless legal review. They had no control, only compliance. Pending arbitration. It was a phrase without meaning, and yet it defined everything. Nothing about it was a command. No one issued it. It was just what was left. The ships that had once glided through space with purpose, intent, and leadership, now found themselves adrift in an expanse with no direction. No one to speak to. No one to answer. Back in the Pact's high command, Rol Vareth stood in front of the display, his hands trembling just slightly. He had seen many things in his lifetime, battles won, territories reclaimed, but nothing had ever paralyzed him like this. Nothing had ever reduced him to this helplessness. He understood the legal language, the clauses, the treaties, but he didn't understand how it could happen. How this could happen. He ran a hand across his brow. We didn't think, we didn't even suspect. Another message came through. This time, it wasn't even marked with a timestamp. It simply played, pending arbitration. It was as if the universe itself had decided they no longer mattered. No force, no energy, just the slow, grinding force of humanity's long-forgotten influence. Pending arbitration. Kren Hollick turned his face away from the cold laser plasma display, his breath shallow. He had seen too many failures. He had watched entire fleets fall to enemy weapons, watched planets burn under bombardment. But this was different. This was not failure. This was a recalibration, a systemic shift so precise, so deliberate, that it required no ships, no weapons, just an idea, a treaty, a clause, and that was what truly terrified him. No human forces had fired a single shot. No declaration had been made. Humanity's silence was the weapon. It had always been the weapon, the simple, unspoken threat of a system designed to outlast all others. A network built not on firepower, but on bureaucracy, on agreement, on the sheer weight of structure. As Hollick stood, staring at the screens now flooding with the same message, a realization passed over him, a realization he had hoped to avoid, that no one in the room had wanted to face. Humanity's systems, its infrastructure, had been in place for centuries, deep in the treaties, behind the council votes, buried beneath all the assumptions the Pact had made. They hadn't attacked, they hadn't fired, they had reclaimed, they had rewritten the rules, and the galaxy had allowed them to do so without question. Pending arbitration. The message flashed for the last time, And then nothing. Just the empty hum of systems shifting, unthinking. No war, no cries for help, just silence. Rolvereth's voice cracked as he turned away, unable to speak anymore. No one would answer. No fleet would come. Earth had never answered. And now the galaxy was left to wonder. When did it stop being their galaxy? Rakvoran's hands hovered over the console. It wasn't the first time he'd had to deliver a message to a universe unwilling to listen, but this time was different. This time, his message would be broadcast not just to one council or one fleet, but across every last functioning channel in the galaxy. He spoke not for validation or victory, but for recognition. The laser plasma display in front of him flickered, the faintest hum of static whispering as it lit up with the fading light of forgotten wars. The final transmission, a single phrase, had been cycling through every communication node, every relay tower, every broken station that still clung to life within the now crippled networks of the Pact. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't form at first. This moment had no need for ceremony. There was no swelling of orchestras, no blaring of horns. This moment was finality. This was the end. "You mistook absence for weakness," he began, his voice low but clear, the words themselves rising from something deeper than anger. They came from years of watching the arrogant, self-assured structures of the galaxy crumble under the pressure of their own self-delusion. "You misunderstood silence. We wrote the rules before you learned to read them." He leaned forward, staring at the illuminated edges of the screen, as if seeing something beyond it. He wasn't looking at the holographic protocols or the list of treaties. He was looking at a reality no one would ever acknowledge until it was too late. Behind him, in the cold space of his final station, an empty command room where no one could offer any support, there were no cheers, no applause. There would be no victory parades. There would be no accolade. Humanity didn't need to advertise its supremacy. It had already demonstrated it in the silence. This was Earth's greatest strength, not speaking, not making threats, not even acknowledging that anyone else could challenge it. Another silence fell, and the emergency beacon on the console blinked once more. It was the same message, playing over and over again, as though trying to comprehend its own significance. It was an act, yes, but it was an act of legal will, not military might. "This node is now maintained under Clause A41 Aleph. This is not an attack." Rak's mind turned inward as the beacon continued to flash. The system had rewired itself. Galactic trade networks, command uplinks, even starport relays were no longer under anyone's control, except Earth's. Not one weapon had been fired. Not one shot had been exchanged. The galaxy had fought its battles through its infrastructure, and in the end it had lost. The old treaties, the forgotten laws, had come back to enforce themselves. Treaty clauses, once considered nothing more than paperwork, had dismantled entire fleets, and now, only one phrase remained: pending arbitration. It was a simple thing, a bureaucratic term, one that meant nothing to most of the galaxy. But to Earth, it was everything. Pending arbitration. That was the reality they now faced. The networks they relied on, the very ones they had depended on to control the galaxy, had been co-opted, twisted, turned, and replaced. Rak's gaze lifted from the console. His eyes narrowed as he thought back to the council chambers, where his warnings had been met with laughter and scorn. They had mocked him. They had dismissed him as a veteran who had lost his mind in the chaos of war. They hadn't understood. They hadn't listened. They had thought themselves invincible, and now, the galaxy would pay the price for that arrogance. Pending arbitration. The phrase echoed once more, a relentless reminder of their inability to adapt, of their unwillingness to see what was plainly in front of them. Earth had never declared war. It had never needed to. Rak stood, his hand resting lightly on the console. The lights around him flickered, and then stilled, just as everything else had. His message, simple yet final, had been delivered. There was no need to speak it again. There was no need for further words. "We wrote the rules before you learned to read them." He turned and walked away from the console, his footsteps soft but certain. In the empty silence of his final station, he knew something the rest of the galaxy would only learn too late. It wasn't about who had the mightiest weapon. It was never about ships or armies or fleets. It was about the system, the infrastructure, and who controlled the narrative, and Earth controlled it now. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, and all that was left was the slow, inevitable collapse of the old order. The galaxy had spoken. It had given its verdict, and Earth had written the final clause. The emergency beacon continued to pulse. The message played, louder and louder, through every remaining communications hub in the galaxy, but no one responded. The silence, once a void of unanswered questions, now spread like a disease. The galaxy wasn't just silent, it was paralyzed. Pending arbitration. The words echoed across empty space, fading slowly until they were no longer needed.